Group 1, please stand. Who will be share screen? Do you have problem, Group 1? Hello, Group 1.
Answering it, Umi, Anissa. Yeah.
Oh, Anissa. Yeah. Thank you, Anissa. Okay. Okay, please start, Group 1.
Okay, let me start it. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Yeah. So we are from Group 1. We are from Group 1, which is consists of Aisyah Nurul Hasana Purnama or IC, me, Andini Fajarwati, and Anissa Fauzia. Next. Next, please. Yeah. Thank you. So the first one is, what is factual knowledge? Maybe I see can explain it to our friends. I see. Could you hear me?
Yes, Andini.
Please, I see. Thank you.
What is factual knowledge? And factual knowledge is the basic element students must know to be acquainted with a discipline or solve problem in it. So the factual knowledge is true because it corresponds to the actual situation. That if a scientist has an experiment, the result is the fact. Because if we try it again, the result will be the same. And the factual knowledge is mostly arises at the level of abstraction that relatively low. So, next, maybe the factual knowledge is this two kind of factual knowledge is factual terminology and factual specific details and elements. So the first is knowledge of terminology, maybe will be explained by Andini.
Okay, thank you, I see. So this is one of subtopic in factual knowledge, which is knowledge of terminology. Knowledge of terminology includes knowledge of specific verbal and non-verbal labels and symbols. So it contains about symbol and etc. Words, numerals, signs, pictures in this knowledge of terminology. And it is used to communicate with others about phenomena within their discipline. So in any attempt by experts, they communicate with others using this using the special labels and symbols to explain about phenomena within their discipline. And in many cases, it is impossible for experts to discuss problems in their discipline without making use of essential terms. Next. I think the example of wait, I think I think the example of the knowledge of terminology is related. I don't know if disappeared here. Maybe. Hmm. Maybe we can continue to Anissa first.
Okay, thank you, Andini. So I will to explain the knowledge of a specific detail and elements. Knowledge of specific detail and elements refer to knowledge of even location, people, dates, source of information, and the like. It may include very precise and specific information, such as exact date of the event or the general order of magnitude of phenomena. Every subject matter contains some even location, people, dates, and other detail that expert now and believe to represents important knowledge about the field. Such specific facts are a basic information that experts use in describing their field and in thinking about specific problems or topic in field. So I will to show the example of knowledge of specific detail and element. The first, knowledge emerges fact about particular culture and societies. Knowledge of particular fact important to health, citizenship, and other human needs and concerns. Knowledge of the more significant names, place, and even in the news. Knowledge of the reputation of given author for presenting and interpreting a fact on the environmental problem, and knowledge of major product and export of countries, and the last, the knowledge of reliable source of information for was processing. Thank you. So I will to back in Andini.
Okay, so I'm sorry. When I was presented, there is some slide disappear. So I just mention it the example of knowledge in terminology. The first is knowledge of the alphabet, and then the second, knowledge of scientific terms, example, labels for parts of a cell, names for subatomic particles, and the third, knowledge of the vocabulary of painting, and then knowledge of important accounting terms, and then knowledge of the standard representational symbols on maps and charts, and the last is knowledge of the symbols used to indicate the correct pronunciation of words. That's all from us. If you guys want to give a suggestion, question, or critique, please give it to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for group 1, Aisa, Andini, Anissa. Okay, please, big applause. The next, please move to
Thank
group
you
2.
very much, Miss.
Yeah, because this is only for the sharing from the summary based on our ebook. For the next, as the basic for the next to do practice how to construct test item. Okay, please, group 2. Who will share screen? Okay, Dia. Thank you, Dia.
Oke, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So we are from group 2. We would like to explain about conceptual knowledge. So about concept, I'm sorry, it's still loading. All right, I will continue. So for the conceptual knowledge, this conceptual knowledge can be understood as knowing the interrelationship and or function among the details and elements that make up larger structures. Conceptual knowledge includes schemas, mental models, or implicit or explicit theories in different cognitive psychological models. So there are 3 subtypes of conceptual knowledge, which are knowledge of classification and categories, knowledge of principles and generalization, and the third one is knowledge of the theories, model, and structures. So for the first, we'll present it by Atoyla.
Okay, thank you, Dea. So for the first from the 3 subtypes is first BA or knowledge of classification and categorize. So the subtype of BA includes the specific categorized classes, divisions, and arrangement that are used in different subject matters. This type of knowledge is somewhat more general and often more abstract than the knowledge of terminology and specific facts. Classification and categorize are largely the result of agreement and convenience, whereas knowledge of specific details stem more directly from observation, experimentation, and discovery. This knowledge of classification and categorize is an important aspect of developing expertise in an academic discipline. The example of knowledge of classification and categorize is knowledge of the variety types of literature and knowledge of the different periods of geologic time. Okay.
Okay, next. Principle and generalization are composed of classification and categories and are used to study phenomena or solve problems in the discipline. Knowledge of principle and generalization have the greatest value in describing, predicting, explaining, or determining the most appropriate, relevant action or direction to be taken. Example, knowledge of major generalization about particular culture, knowledge of the fundamental law of physics, knowledge of the principle of chemistry that are relevant to life process and health, knowledge of the implication of American foreign trade policies for the international economy and international goodwill, knowledge of major principles involved in learning, knowledge of principle of federalism, knowledge of major principle often govern rudimentary arithmetic operation. Such as the commutative principle and associative principle.
So for the last subtypes is knowledge of theories, model, and structures. For this subtype includes knowledge of the different paradigms, epistemologies, theories, and models that different disciplines use to describe, understand, explain, and predict phenomena. Disciplines have different paradigms and epistemologies for structuring inquiry, and the students should come to know this different way of conceptualizing and organizing subject matter and areas of reason within subject matter. So for this subtype, we can highlight just for this point, and for the example for this subtype is in biology, for example, knowledge of genetic models or knowledge of the theory of evolution. And for the other example is knowledge of the interrelationship among chemical principles and the basis for chemical theories. And the another one is knowledge of the theory of plate tectonics. So maybe that's all from us, group 2, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Please speak applause to group 2. Thank you very much for sharing the summary from the procedural, from the conceptual knowledge. The next, please, group 3.
Yes.
Yeah. Falista, only do this presentation with Diki, right? Dela dispen.
Yes, Miss. Right.
Okay, so please help me to remove Dela because we'll share the new topic for Dela and Ilma. Okay, thank you. After this session. Okay, thank you. Okay, please, group 3.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
We would like to explain about the knowledge dimension, which is procedural knowledge. The first is the definition itself. So the procedural knowledge often takes the form of a series of sequence of steps to be followed. It includes knowledge or skill, algorithms, techniques, the methods, collectively known as procedures. If the factual knowledge and conceptual knowledge represent the what of knowledge, so the procedural knowledge concerns the how. In other words, procedural knowledge reflects knowledge in different processes, whereas factual knowledge and conceptual knowledge deal with might be termed products. This is the example of procedural knowledge. Accordingly, we reserve the term procedural knowledge for the knowledge of skill, algorithms, techniques, methods that are subject-specific or discipline-specific. For example, in mathematics, there are algorithms for performing long divisions, solving quadratic equations, and establishing the congruence of triangles. Next, in the science, for example, there are general methods for designing and performing experiments. And in social studies, for example, the procedures for reading maps, estimating the age of physical artifacts, and collecting historical data. Meanwhile, in the language arts, for example, the procedures for spelling words in English and for generating grammatically correct sentence. And the next, there are types of procedural knowledge that will explain by Diki.
All right, thank you very much. So as we know before, the procedural knowledge is about how to do something, how to do things. And this is the first types of procedural knowledge. It is knowledge of subject-specific skills and algorithms. Is a common example is knowledge of algorithm used when mathematical exercise occurs. The procedure for multiplying fraction in arithmetic when applied generally result in a fixed answer, of course, because every procedure in this case gonna be the same in every person who gonna make this procedure of multiplying fraction in arithmetic gonna do the same thing, do the same produce. That's why the answer is gonna be fixed. And then also the concept here is procedural knowledge. The result of using procedural knowledge is often factual knowledge or conceptual knowledge. It's what's it again? It's already discussed in the previous group. For example, the algorithm for the addition of whole numbers that we use to add 2 plus 2, right, is procedural knowledge. The plus 2 plus 2 is procedural knowledge, while the answer is going to be 4, and that 4 is a factual knowledge. And then once again, the emphasis here is on the student's knowledge of the procedure rather than on his or her ability to use it. So it's not really depend on someone's gonna be able or not be able, but it's just about how he or she do this equation, something like that. Next slide, please. I forgot. Before this slide, for other example of the what's it called again? Knowledge of subject specific technique and not this one, the previous one, the subject specific skills and algorithms. For other example is like knowledge of the skill used in painting with watercolors. Yeah, this one. Knowledge of the skills used to determine word meaning based on actual analysis, or a knowledge of the various algorithms for solving quadratic equations. That's other example of this type of procedural knowledge. All right, now please next slide. All right, and the B is knowledge of subject sus amogus. Knowledge of subject specific techniques and methods. Knowledge of subject-specific techniques and methods includes knowledge that is largely the result of consensus, agreement, or disciplinary norms rather than knowledge that is more directly an outcome of observations, experimentation, or discovery. For example, knowledge of the general scientific method and how to apply it to the different situations, including social situations and policy problems, reflects a scientific way of thinking. Another example is the mathematization of problems not originally present as mathematics problem. And other example for this kind of this type of knowledge is here, the knowledge of research method relevant to the social science, and then knowledge of the techniques used by scientists in seeking solution to the problems. And the last is knowledge of the method for evaluating health concepts. That's the other example of knowledge of subjects, subject-specific technique and methods. All right, next. And this is the last types of our procedural knowledge, is the knowledge of criteria for determining when to use appropriate procedures. All right, it's a systematization that is used by subject matter experts as they attack problems in their field. Experts know when and where to apply their knowledge. They have criteria that help them make decisions about when and where to use different types of subject-specific procedural knowledge. That is, their knowledge is conditionalized in that they know the conditions under which the procedure are to be applied. For example, here is in solving a physics problems, of course, an expert can recognize the type of physics problem and apply the appropriate procedure. And for other example here, when it's knowledge of the criteria for determining which of several types of essays to write, or knowledge of the criteria for determining which method to use in solving algebraic equations. And the last is knowledge of the criteria for determining which statistical procedure to use with data collection in a particular experiment. I think that's all for all the types, the three types of procedural knowledge. All right, back to you, Icha.
Okay, thank you everyone for your attention. That's all from us. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for group procedural knowledge, group 3. Okay, let's move to the group 4, metacognitive knowledge, please.
Let me share my screen, Miss.
Okay, sure.
Wait, Miss, it's still loading. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So we are from group 4, consists of Fauziah Utami Malik, Hayataira, and Hesti Husnul Khotimah. We're going to tell you guys about metacognitive knowledge.
Hello, Haya. No sound. Group 4, do you have problem?
Okay, Miss, maybe Haya's connection is not good. I will share screen, Miss.
Okay. Thank you, Hesti.
Okay, Miss. Anyone can see my screen?
Not yet, Hesti.
Yes. Yes, Hesti. Okay, Miss, I'm sorry, still loading. And still not response.
From group 5, maybe, may you help group 4 to share screen the presentation from group 4, and then we'll be continue
Yes,
group 5.
yes, Miss, I will try to help share the screen.
Okay, thank you, Ilva.
Thank you, Ilva.
Okay, please, group 4, start the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Ilva, and I'm sorry, Miss. And for our group, take the topic about the metacognitive and knowledge. Okay, boleh next slide, Ilva. Okay, for the metacognitive, knowledge is knowledge about cognition in general, as well as awareness of and knowledge about one's own cognition. So, in this knowledge, emphasize and control the awareness and responsibility of student knowledge and what they taught. Okay, for the next slide, maybe we'll explain by Fauzia.
So here the metacognitive knowledge includes two strategic knowledge, knowledge about cognitive tasks, including contextual and conditional knowledge. And then the third is self-knowledge. Strategic knowledge includes knowledge of general strategies for learning, thinking, and problem solving. Example for this type of knowledge include the understanding that repeating information is method of remembering, and the understanding of planning strategies to achieve goals. Second is knowledge about cognitive tasks. This includes knowledge of the types of cognitive operation required to perform certain tasks, as well as cognitive strategies that are appropriate in certain situation and condition. This type of knowledge includes the understanding that study books or school books are more difficult to understand than paper books, and the understanding that summarizing can be used to improve understanding. And last is self-knowledge. This includes knowledge of self, weaknesses, and abilities in learning. Examples of this type of knowledge include understanding that someone who is an expert in one field is not necessarily an expert in another. And then include understanding of the goals to be achieved, and understanding of the abilities possessed in performing a task.
The next one is assessing objectives involving metacognitive knowledge. So metacognitive knowledge may require a different perspective in correct answer. Metacognitive knowledge provide even more possibilities for individual differences to emerge in assessment. Metacognitive knowledge may be best assessed in the context of classroom activities and discussion of various strategies. For metacognitive itself, it may be a best knowledge for students because It's involving the certain courses such as learning strategies, thinking skills, also study skills, and then it engages students in learning about all three aspects of metacognitive knowledge. So students can compare about the knowledge they know with what they get. So that metacognitive knowledge.
Okay, I think that's all from group 4. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for group 4, and thank you very much for group 1, 2, 3, 4 has been delivered about the knowledge dimension. So we have now 4 types of knowledge dimension: factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive. The next, let's discuss about the cognitive process dimension, or we can see C1 up to C5, sorry, C6. C1, remember, please, group 5.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from group 5. Humaira and Ilfa will present about the first cognitive process dimension, which is remember. Next. Remembering is the lowest level of learning in the cognitive process dimension in Bloom taxonomy. It involves retrieving relevant knowledge from long-term memory of the students. The two associated cognitive processes are recognizing and recalling. The relevant knowledge may be factual, conceptual, procedural, or metacognitive, or some combination of these. The first cognitive process in remembering is recognizing or identifying. Recognizing involves retrieving relevant knowledge from long-term memory in order to compare it with present information. In recognizing, the student search long-term memory for a piece of information that is identical to the present information. Next. There are 3 main methods of presenting a recognition task for the purpose of assessment are verification, matching, and forced choice. Next. And for the next is assessment for recognizing. The first is verification task. The student is given some information and must choose whether or not it is correct, like true or false question. The second is in matching. There are 2 lists are presented and the student must choose how each item in one list corresponds to an item in the other list. And the third is forced choice task. The student is given a prompt along with several possible answers and must choose which answer is correct or choose the best answer, like multiple choice question. Next, and for the next will be explained by Ilfa.
Okay, for the next is recalling, or we can say it retrieving. Recalling involves the retrieving relevant knowledge from a long-term memory when given a prompt to do so. The prompt is often a question, and in recalling, the student searches long-term memory for a piece of information and brings the piece of information to working memory where it can be processed. The next is the assessment for recalling. For the assessment task for the recalling, it can be varied in the number and quality of the cues students are provided. With slow queuing, the student isn't given any hints or related information, like the questions will be ended with the question marks, and the question is only like, what is the meaning of something? That's like that. And for the with high queuing, the students is given several hints, like
fill in the blank. So for the example is in the metric system, a meter is a measure of, and the student must to fill the blank one. For the assessment task for recalling can also vary in the amount of embedding or the extent to which the items are placed within a larger meaningful context. With low embedding, the recall task is presented as a single, isolated event as in the preceding examples, and with high embedding, the recall task is included within the context of a larger problem, such as asking students to recall the formula for the area of a circle when solving a word problems that requires that formula.
That's all for the cognitive process dimension. Number 1, remember. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Group 5. Ilva, may you help to the continue share screen for the following group? Is it okay? For make effective time? Okay, thank you,
Yes,
Ilva.
Miss Ali.
Okay, the next please, group 6. Big applause to group 5. Okay, group 6, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are group 6. We will present about the cognitive process dimension, which is about understand. Next slide. So, about understand, students understand when they build connection between the new knowledge to begin and their prior knowledge, more specifically conceptual knowledge, provides a basis for understanding. Cognitive process in the category of understand include interpreting, exemplifying, classifying, summarizing, inferring, comparing, and explaining. For the first, we will present by Shipa is about interpreting and exemplifying.
Okay, thank you, Mira. Interpreting occurs when a student is able to convert information from one representational form to another. And exemplifying occurs when a student gives a specific example or instance of a general concept or principle.
Okay, next about classifying and summarizing, we will present by me. For the classifying occurs when a student recognizes that something, a particular instance or example, belongs to a certain category, concept, or principle. And for the summarizing occurs when a student suggests a single statement that represents present information or abstract a general them. And next we will present by Abi is about comparing and explaining.
Okay, but first of all, I want to talk about inferring. Inferring occurs when a student is able to abstract a concept or a principle that accounts for a set of example or instance by encoding the relevant features of each instance, and most important by noting the relationship among them. The next one is comparing. Comparing involves detecting similarities and difference between two or more objects, event, ideas, problem, or situation, such as determining how a well-known event, example a recent political scandal, is like a less familiar event, example a historical political scandal. Then the last one, explaining occurs when a student is able to construct and use cause and effect model of a system.
Okay, I think that's all from us. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much for group 6. And the next, please, group 7.
Okay. Yes. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Okay, we are from group 7. There are Nabila, Mutiara, and Fahriza Amri. And we will explain about the cognitive process dimension C3, which is apply. Next. Okay, so for C3 or applied cognitive level, this is carry out or use a procedure in a given situation. Next, Ilva. So in applied cognitive level involves using procedures to perform exercise or solve problems. So in this cognitive level, students have to allocate a procedure in the solving the problems or exercise. So in this cognitive level, also there are two cognitive skills, which is executing when the task is an exercise or familiar, and implementing when the task is a problem or unfamiliar. So for the executing will be explained by Balkis.
Thank you, Bella. Executing is a student routine carry out a procedure when confronted with a familiar task. For example, is exercise. Executing is more frequently associated with the use of skill and algorithm than with technique and method. Next. For sample objective and corresponding assessment in executing is students are asked to calculate division. The instruction is to divide. It's a necessary procedural knowledge, and to assess the objective, the student is given a worksheet yang sebelumnya belum Pak. Next aja dulu. Nah, okay. The student is given a worksheet then has 50 whole number, division, exercise, and is asked to find the equation in the question. Next. And for assessment format is a student is given a familiar task, then can be performed using a well-known procedure. Student might be asked to supply the answer or where appropriate select from among a set of possible answers. Furthermore, because this implies is one the procedure as well as the answer, student might be required not only to find the answer but also to solve their work.
All right, thank you, Balkis. So that's for the executing, and the second one is for the implementing that will be explained by Fahri.
All right, so implement is when a student select and use a procedure that they know on an unfamiliar task. Due to this, student has to have the knowledge of the issue encountered and the procedures that they can use. This means that implement works alongside with other cognitive skills such as create and understand. Next. So the process of implementation is that first, student encounter unfamiliar issue. For example, they encounter, let's say, exponents while they only learn about, let's say, multiplication. And then the second one, student view, select, and modify procedures most appropriate to complete the task. In this case, again, they know that you can solve exponents with multiplications. And then third, in case that no available procedures that can be modified, students develop own procedures using conceptual knowledge. In the case that student doesn't know about multiplication, they know that let's say exponent is if this number is multiplied by the other number. And then the fourth one is that in order to assess students applying skills, one must design their assessment. Next. So the assessment of implement would be that we have to assess that there is a problem that students are unfamiliar with, and then we have to assess how they specificate the problems, and then we have to assess how, like what process they determine to be suitable for solving the problem. Yep.
All right, thank you, Balkis and Fahriza. So everyone, that's all from us from group 7. Thank you so much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Big applause for group 7. Thank you. The next, please, group 8.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from group 8 that will explain about the cognitive process dimension about analyze that consists of Nimas, Nola, and Rahma. Next. So first is definition of analyze. In analyze, students learning to determine the important pieces of message that called differentiating, and the ways in which the pieces of message are organized that called organizing, and the underlying purpose of the message that called attributing. For example, students should describe a problem or object to its elements and determines how interconnection between them. Next.
For the next, it's differentiating. Differentiating involves distinguish the part of a whole structure in the term of their relevance or importance, and it occurs when a student discriminates relevant from irrelevant information or information from unimportant information, and then outlines to the relevant or important information. For example, student can analyzing the causes of the decreasing population of finch in the city of West Java. And the next is organizing. Involves identifying the elements of a communication or situation and recognizing how they fit together into a coherent structure. And it is usually occur in conjunction with differentiating. The student must identify the relevant or the important elements and then determines the overall structure within which the elements fit. And for example, analyzing the dynamic balance of an ecosystem.
All right, I will continue. So this is the last point of the C for the cognitive process dimension, which is attributing. So what is attributing? Attributing involves a process of deconstruction in which the student determine the intention of the author of the presented material. Attributing occurs biases, values, or intention underlying communication. And what is the example of attributing is analyzing why someone wrote in newspaper that the forest in West Java is still quite extensive. So this is all from the group 8. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, group 8. And the next, please, I would like to invite group 9.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, we are from group 9, consists of Rahmi Hatma Harifa, Rizky Maulana Ashidik, and Sofa Nabila. We will talk about cognitive process dimension, which is we have evaluate. Next, okay. What are evaluate in cognitive? Evaluate is defined as a making judgment based on criteria and standards. The criteria most often used are quality, effectiveness, efficiency, and concentration. Next. And checking and critique in evaluate. The category evaluate includes the cognitive process of checking judgment about internal consistency and critiquing judgments based on external criteria. Next. Okay. So what is the example? So the category evaluate includes the cognitive process of cognitive process checking judgment about the internal consistency and critiquing judgment based on external criteria. Next, please.
Okay, now for the checking. Checking involves testing for internal inconsistencies or fallacies in an operation of a product. For example, checking occurs when a student tests whether or not a conclusion follows from its premise. Alternative terms for checking are testing, detecting, monitoring, and coordinating. Sample objectives and corresponding assessment in checking. Students look for internal inconsistencies. A sample objectives can be, there are two examples of it. The first is sample objective in social sciences and sample objective in the sciences. In social sciences, it could be to learn in detecting inconsistencies in persuasive messages, while a sample objective in the sciences could be to learn in determining whether a scientist's conclusion follows the observed data. And assessment formats, checking tasks can involve operation of products given to the students or ones created by the students themselves. Checking can also take place within the context of carrying out a solution to a problem or performing a task where one is concerned with the consistency of the actual implementation. The next will be delivered by Sofa.
Okay, thank you, Rahmi. So the next is critiquing. Critiquing involves judging a product or operation based on externally imposed criteria and standards. Sorry, can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay. So for example, judging the merits of a particular solution to the problem of acid rain in terms of its likely effectiveness and its associated costs. Next. And the sample objectives and corresponding assessment. For the objective in the social science, an objective could be to learn to evaluate proposed solutions such as eliminate or grading to a social problem. And in the natural science, an objective could be to learn to evaluate the reasonableness of a hypothesis. And in mathematics, to learn to judge which of the alternative methods is more effective and efficient way of solving given problems. Next. And assessment format, a student may be asked to critique his her own hypothesis or question of or thus generated by someone else. The critique could be based on positive, negative, or both kind of criteria and yield both positive and negative consequences. Example, in critiquing a school district's proposal for year-round school, a student will generate positive consequences such as the elimination of the learning loss over summer vacation and negative consequences such as disruption of family vocation. That's all for our groups.
Okay, thank you very much, Group 9. The last, please, Group 10.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So we are from Group 10, consists of Sri Rahma, Suri Khairani, and me, Zahra Faiza, will explain about a cognitive process that is CREAT. Next. So CREAT is generally coordinated with the student's previous learning experiences requires creative thinking on the part of the students. Create is different because it also involves the construction of an original product. Next. So create involves putting elements together to form a coherent or functional whole. Objectives classified as create have students make a new product by mentally reorganizing some elements or parts into a pattern or structure that is not clearly present before. Next. And it is important to note that many objectives in the create category do not rely on originality or uniqueness. The teacher's intent with these objectives is that students should be able to synthesize material into a whole. This synthesis is often required in papers in which the student is expected to assemble previously thought material into an organized presentation. Next. All right, this slide will be explained by Suri.
For 6.1 generating, the generating involves representing the problems and arriving at alternatives or hypotheses that meet certain criteria. The way of solving the problem is initially represent, suggest possible solution, or coming up with a new representation of the problem may suggest different solution. Generating involves divergent thinking and forms the core of what can be called creative thinking. So the generating can be called as hypothesizing. Next, please. And this is the sample objective and correspondent assessment of generating. In generating, a student is given a description of a problem and must produce alternative solution. The objective could be to learn to generate multiple useful solutions for social problems if the topic is the social. The teacher should construct a set of criteria that are shared with the student, and then the corresponding assessment task asks students to write as many hypotheses as they can explain. Next, please. For the assessment format for generating, assessing generating typically involves construct response formats in which a student is asked to produce alternatives or hypotheses. There are two types of assessment format. In a consequences task, a student must list all the possible consequences of a certain event, and in the second is uses tasks. A student must list all possible uses for an object. Based on from the assessment formats, it is almost impossible to use the multiple choices for the assessment format in generating processes. Next will be explained by Sri Rahma.
Okay, thank you, Suri and Zahra. So the create is associated with three cognitive processes. The first is generating, and the second is planning. Planning involves devising a solution method that meets a problem's criteria, and also carrying out the step to create the actual solution for a given problem. In the planning, students develop a solution method and establish sub-goals to be performed when solving the problem. Meanwhile, for the teacher, teachers skip setting planning objective, instead setting their objective in terms of producing, which is the final stage of the creative process. Next. This is for the assessment format. Assessment format in planning may be assessed by asking students to develop workout solution, describe solution plan, or select solution plans for a given problem. Next. I think for the planning there is a slide missing. It's about the sample objective and corresponding assessment. Maybe I will explain without the PowerPoint. For the sample objective and corresponding assessment, we can, for the example is in history. A sample objective would be able to plan the research paper on given historical topics. And the second example in the natural sciences, a sample objective could be to design the studies to test various hypotheses. For example, an assessment task asks students to plan a way to determining which of the three factors to determines the rate of oscillation of a pendulum. And also the example in mathematics, the sample objective can be able to lay out the steps needed to solve the geometry problems. For example, an assessment task asks students to devise a plan to determining the volume of the frustum of a pyramid. Next. The last of will be explained by Zahra.
All right, so the last process in CRIT is producing, or the alternative term is constructing. As we noted earlier, objective within the category CRIT may or may not include originality or uniqueness as one of the specification that is due to the objective of producing process. Next. So in producing, a student is given a functional description of a goal and must create a product that satisfies the description. It involves carrying out a solution plan for a given problem. Sample objectives involve producing novel and useful products that meet certain requirements. Next. So the sample objective in science could be to learn to design habitats for certain species and certain purposes. And for the corresponding assessment could be the task that asks students to design the living quarters of a space station. And the specification become the criteria for evaluating student performance relative to the objective. And these specifications then should be included in a scoring rubric that is given to the students in advance of the assessment. Next. So for assessment format, a common task for assessing producing is a design task in which students are asked to create a product that corresponds to certain specifications. For example, students may be asked to produce schematic plans for a new high school that include new ways for students to conveniently store their personal belongings. Next. All right, that's all from group 10. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Big applause to group 10. Okay, thank you very much, Ilva, to have the present. Okay, so student, let's review our presentation for today. I have four survey in here. Wait, I will launch. Okay, is it appear in your Zoom screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, 4 questions. Please try to answer. Let's review. The number 1 is the knowledge dimension for schemas, mental models, or implicit or explicit theories. Please choose one. And then the number 2, what is knowledge dimension for skills, techniques, and method? Factual, conceptual, procedural, or metacognitive. And number 3, what is knowledge dimension for self-knowledge and strategic knowledge? Conceptual, procedural, metacognitive. The number 4, the last, what is cognitive process dimension for executing, remembering, understanding, or applying, or creating? Okay, please. Okay, 2 response, 3. Six, seven answer. Okay, let's see the recap. Can you see the recap in here in your screen?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, number 1, what's the knowledge dimension for schemas, mental models, or implicit or explicit theories? What should be the correct answer, student? Factual, procedural, conceptual, or metacognitive? Schema, mental models. Pardon? Conceptual. Okay. 6 students and 3 students still incorrect. And the number 2, what is knowledge dimension for skills, technique, and method?
Procedural.
Yeah. 2 student and 4 student incorrect answer. And number 3, what is knowledge dimension for self-knowledge and strategy knowledge?
Metacognitive.
Cognitive, yeah. 4 student and 3 student is correct. And the last, what is the cognitive process dimension for executing?
Applying.
Applying, C3, right? Okay. 1 student choose understanding and 8 creating. Okay, so student, that's all for today. Hopefully you can get the meaningful experience and knowledge. See you next week. Thank you very much for waiting me for this class. Thank you. Mohon maaf lahir batin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika asyhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Bye bye. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Miss.
Have a nice day.
Miss.
Nice day.
Goodbye, everyone.